Welcome into the Flagship Podcast, everybody. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined by my esteemed colleague out of Tampa Catholic High School, the one and only Eric Henry of Horns247.com. Eric, we are about a week into fall camp, and we are, full disclosure, recording on Wednesday morning, August 7th. We are awaiting results of a knee injury suffered by running back CJ Baxter in fall camp practice on Tuesday. And so let's start there, because obviously we don't know exactly the severity at this point. The MRI was supposed to be done this morning, so results will come probably later today. But just you wrote about this in your 4 downs column that I would suggest everybody get over to horns247.com and read. And you talked about the depth at running back that the Texas Longhorns have if CJ Baxter were to have to miss time.
Yeah, Chip. I mean, like you always give the full disclosure on when we were recording. Full disclosure, I was writing that column last night after, of course, we were at Texas's media viewing window for practice. And when that injury came across, like, oh, all right, we need to kind of make sure we emphasize that. I'd planned on emphasizing the depth as is, Chip, because Steve Sarkisian has emphasized the depth. It's been you go back and you read through some of the transcripts of Stark's pressers and things of that nature, and you kind of sense a theme, cautious optimism regarding how good this team can be. But Steve has been very adamant in talking about the fact that, hey, now we can 2-spot, right? We can do 2 fields. We can go 11 on 11 and, with teams, first team, second team, third team, fourth team. So depth was going to be a feature of that column as is. But we've talked about it throughout the offseason. Jaydon Blue, his emergence. Trey Wisner, we've talked about him, saying he's someone who's going to earn a role that evolves from being a special teams ace to someone who's going to see more time on offense. Well, now a week and a half into fall camp, CJ Baxter gets banged up, Chip. This is now the 3rd time, right? The first injury was the rib injury, if memory serves me correct. I can't remember if it was the knee or the rib. I know it was there was the rib where he fell on the ball. I can't remember if that one happened at Bama or if that was week 1 against Rice, right? But this is now the 3rd injury that CJ's had in about 18, 19 months here on the 40 acres. The positive, right, is, and we're still waiting on results for this, but there haven't been any major injuries. It's all kind of, Chip, not soft tissue injuries, not those things that you look at your strength coach and say, all right, what's going on here? Obviously, Torrey Beckton does a great job. Kind of flukish things that will happen playing football, right? You fall on the ball, hits your rib, or you get hit in the wrong spot and you get a knee. However, this is where that depth for Steve Sarkisian pays off. You don't, and this is no disrespect to CJ, you almost don't miss a beat when you have a Jaydon Blue. You have an emerging guy like Trey Wisner. You have the freshmen and Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark. Right now, I will say this. Let's look at CJ last year. You don't want to just say it's a plug and play type thing. There is an adjustment to being the starting running back. There's an adjustment to that type of workload. Just ask CJ Baxter last year, right? You can't just say, hey, Trey Wisner, come in, be a force. However, the thing that I feel most confident about, and you can say this really across positions, Chip, outside of tackle, in my mind, I genuinely feel this way, outside of offensive tackle, in which you just don't have the experience, knock on wood, Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams, you don't have that type of experience with Brandon Baker and Trevor Gooseby and some of the other guys there. Outside of that, I think for a stretch, a game or two, a week or 2 or 3, and that includes Quinn Ewers, you don't want anything to happen to Quinn, but you have to feel confident, Chip, about the depth on this football team should someone get nicked up. So we'll see, as you talked about, where the MRI results land, how long CJ Baxter is going to be out. But in specificity to this injury, I think you don't miss a beat with Jaydon Blue and Trey Wisner and others. and broader sense in terms of the depth on this football team, this is where you have to feel really good if you're a Texas fan that Steve Sarkisian has really, really, for lack of a better word, he has built this team out to a place where if a guy gets nicked up, it's not, oh man, break glass in case of fire. It's we have guys who can come in, who will be ready to go, and who can contribute. And the last thing, Chip, before I give it back to you is this. This, in my mind, is why I think managing this roster throughout camp is key, because you're bracing yourself, you're prepping yourself for an extended season. And as Sark has said, getting guys reps through the first 4 games is key, because in the event someone goes down, you want to make sure someone's not getting their first real game action when the Bullets are live.
Yeah, I those are all great points. And the thing that goes through my mind is pass protection. You've finally gotten CJ Baxter and Jaydon Blue to the point where they feel good about their pass protection. They know the importance of it. That's always one of the hardest things for a young back to understand. They're just worried about, am I hitting the hole the right way? Am I gaining enough yards? Am I making enough plays? Am I catching the ball out of the backfield? When in actuality, they're probably not going to get on the field unless they can protect the passer. And CJ Baxter and Jaydon Blue, we talked to both of them in the last few days, and both of them said, we feel really good about our pass protection. And that's, we got to see Trey Wisner in that role. We know those guys can make plays. They got to be able to protect Quinn Ewers when he drops back to pass, and that running back's got to pick up the free man. And so that's, that fortunately, like you said, the depth, Jaydon Blue, I think, I always bring this up when we mention Jaydon Blue, that Tashard Choice compares him to Jahmyr Gibbs. You'll take that all day long. Tashard Choice recruited Jahmyr Gibbs to Georgia Tech before he transferred to Alabama. The guy ran a 4.3 at the NFL Combine, and Jaydon Blue, one of the fastest players on the team. In his mind, he is the fastest player on the team. So there's no doubt that you've got a frontline NFL type player ready to step in and carry more of the load if need be in Jaydon Blue. And then we'll see how Trey Wisner's developing in his pass protection. But yeah, that depth is critical. So, as we look around the rest of fall camp, you and I, Jeff Howe over at horns247.com have been able to, go in and see some of practice, and that depth it's apparent everywhere. I wrote about the tight ends, our observations, our practice observations, and my goodness, Gunnar Helm and Amari Niblack, and now Juan Davis, and, Jordan Washington and Spencer Shannon. We touched on the running back position, but the depth on the offensive line, the depth of receiver, for crying out loud. We're talking about, 8-9 guys getting reps with the first and second team in fall camp. And then over on defense, on the defensive line, maybe a little thin at linebacker. We're still waiting to see Lianga Lafau, Darian Gillette, Tassili Akana, see it sort of come together for them at the linebacker position behind Anthony Hill and David Benda. But you got 2 stud nickel corners in Jade Barron and Jalen Gilbo, who can also just play corner, both of them. And so that adds depth there. And then, of course, we know about Andrew Makuba coming in from Clemson, the continued development of Derek Williams, Michael Taff, and Jelani McDonald, who continues to run with the first and second team defense at safety. So, the depth is so important for life in the SEC. We haven't lived it yet, Eric, but we know from talking to everyone, having to bounce back from week to week with guys nicked up, and that depth is just so important.
No, I completely agree. I'll take it back to the running back again, just something else you talk about with the pass protection, right? That's no small thing. Kyle Flood talked about 11-man protection when we spoke with the coordinators, right? Big part of that is the running backs. I mean, it probably goes understated by us and maybe, broader public's kind of hard to figure that out, right? Because you look at sacks and automatically they're attributed to the offensive line, right? And when you look at sacks, no one ever says, or very rarely does anyone ever say, all right, well, quarterback held onto the ball too long, or running back missed a blitz pickup here, or tight end. Let's look at offensive line. But to your point, and I think it's a key one, yeah, Jaydon Blue feels good with pass protection. And Chip, I think you would agree here. I mean, Jaydon Blue, not the biggest guy in the world, right? I mean, certainly, he's physical, doesn't mind sticking his nose in there. Or certainly is someone who's very confident, right? I know you're probably gonna write about that at some point in the Insider about his confidence on the pickleball courts, which is disputed by some of the Texas players. But you got to have that type of confidence to pick up, blitzing linebackers and safeties and things of that nature. But Trey Wisner, we've seen him on special teams, not afraid to stick his nose in there, but that's something that takes time as far as learning how to do it. So that aspect is key. You talked about the tight ends and the depth there, right? And that's another thing, Chip, that I think why this Texas team is really equipped. Again, we got to see it in action when we talk about SEC play, but why I think this team is equipped. You can go down position by position. Juan Davis is another guy who we didn't mention there in terms of tight ends, right? Amari Nyblack, Gunnar Helm, Juan Davis seemingly having a good camp, Jordan Washington, the list goes on. So I think, again, when talking about depth, when talking about injuries, when talking about if you lose a player here or there, it's going to be a collective effort, right? Look no further than last year when Quinn Ewers went down, Malik Murphy steps in at quarterback, but you have other guys step up, right? A.D. Mitchell ends up being the guy who gets that synergy with Malik Murphy on offense, and them being guys who make plays on defense in those games. So that, in my mind, is where the depth, just all encompassing for Texas, is going to have to show. And again, we'll see it, but I do think I can't state this enough. And I wrote about it in the 4 Downs piece. Colorado State, listen, God bless Jay Norvell, doing a great job, was an excellent head coach at Nevada, got them some bowl games, seemingly has that thing trending in the right direction in Colorado State. That can't be a game like Rice last year, right? Where you kind of, you go into halftime and it's like, how's this thing going to shape up, right? No, got to get that one done in a decisive fashion. Louisiana Monroe, UTSA, those have to be games, Chip, where the second half of games, the back end of your roster, second team, third team, fourth team are getting those valuable reps, so that in the event that a Mississippi State or a Kentucky or a Vandy or, an Arkansas, the list goes on, not talking about, the Oklahoma, Georgia games of the world, right? But the rest of that SEC schedule, if someone goes down. Chip, Jake Majors went down last year, right? Against Oklahoma. Connor Robertson steps in, valiant effort, right? But didn't have the type of game that Cam Williams had against Kansas State at right tackle, right? You get that type of performance, maybe Texas cashes in down there in the goal line, they win the Red River Shootout, right? So those are the type of things we're talking about with the depth where, hey, if you're not getting your first real taste of game action in conference play, you're equipped to step in and make plays and hold down the fort for however long someone's out.
Well, that leads me to our next point, which is the players you hear about who are starting to emerge. And in fall camp, this is the time. They've had all spring, they've had all summer, and then they're actually putting the pads on and getting after it. And that's where we are now, because the first full padded practice happened on Tuesday. And so, one of the names, a couple of names actually on the offensive line, since you were just touching on the offensive line, Brandon Baker, the freshman offensive tackle, and Daniel Cruz, the freshman center. And I'm willing to go on the record and and say that Brandon Baker is either going to be the backup at left tackle or right tackle at some point this season. It might be going into the season. It might be 3-4 games in, but at some point, freshman Brandon Baker is going to be the backup at left or right tackle. I think he's that good. I think, from what I'm hearing, from what we've seen in practice, and Daniel Cruz, this guy is the future at center for Texas. He's got what they call, an NFL ass, Eric. It's as wide as a billboard, but he can move his feet. He's just got that great center of gravity. He's got that low pad level. I think the coaches are really excited about Daniel Cruz. And I'll throw Jordan Washington in there at tight end as a future star as well. Ryan Wingo, we've talked a lot about. That's a pretty good sample size right there, Eric.
There went our PG rating in the post-production of this. Right there, Chip Brown. Right down. I'm just playing with you. I think we can get away with that and still keep it at the PG rating for the folks at YouTube when this goes up on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. No, in all seriousness, to your point, that's a hell of a freshman class. And Chip, Butch Davis told me this years ago, right, when I was covering FIU. He said, the way to do it is you have to out-recruit every class. And it's not necessarily something that you outright say to guys, right? It's not necessarily something you phrase it that way, but that's what breeds the competition, right? If you're a guy who came in, perfect example, right? And this isn't necessarily a freshman example, but I think it's a good example. Ethan Burke, Trey Moore, right? I know you're going to talk a little bit about the edges before this episode is done, but Ethan Burke, hell of a player, certainly someone who's a starter level, but you got to compete for your job every year, right? There are a handful of guys who maybe come in and you say, that you're not going to get someone who's better than them, right? Baron Sorrell, for example, his value not only on the field, but as a leader, and by all accounts, having a great camp, right? Like he's just made the freaks list for the Athletic. He's a guy who in terms of the on-field production, team was going to break out, right? But no job is guaranteed because you're trying to out-recruit, you're trying to bring in the best talent. So to your point about the freshmen, that's where a Spencer Shannon, a Will Randall, guys like those, they got to look behind their back. Oh, man, this Jordan Washington dude coming in, making plays. Alex January, it's another one that you didn't mention, but he's someone who came in immediately. And if you're a Sadir Mitchell or Jeray Bledsoe, you got to be looking on your shoulder like, hey, you don't want to get passed up by this young freshman, right? But that's how you build a program. That's how you build that depth. That's how you have those types of waves that the best programs, Chip, you've talked about it from your time covering those Mac Brown teams in the mid 2000s, right there above your shoulder. The national championship year with Vince Young. That's how it's done. That's how I've talked about growing up. Being shaped by those Miami teams of the early 2000s, the Florida State teams that had like something crazy like 14 consecutive top 5 finishes or something like that, right? Like that's how you do it. So when you talk about that freshman depth, and I want to quickly talk about the guys on the offensive line, that stuff is huge. That's how you get, I don't want to place this on a Brandon Baker, but that's how you get a Bryant McKinney who steps in immediately as a sophomore or junior, from a JUCO guy and doesn't allow a sack, right? You have to build that type of talent out. So to me, that's just an encouraging thing. I know some fans might be a little bit concerned at like, man, this freshman's coming in and all of a sudden he's the center of the future, or to your point, Chip, he's the backup left tackle. But no, that just means the train is moving in the right direction in my mind.
Yeah. A few other players I think that have gotten some mention who are, not the household names. In addition to Trey Moore, I think we're seeing Colin Simmons, coming along. He's getting reps with the twos quite a bit. And then, elsewhere on the defense, Leonga Lafau. Now, this guy is an interesting character to me because I think he reminds me of Jalen Ford in his development. He's a guy who just needs to trust what he sees and shoot his shot. And I think if he gets into a game and he makes that play, kind of like we saw with Jaylen Ford making the play, getting that third down sack against Bryce Young in 2022, and then Jaylen Ford just took off like a rocket after not posting a single tackle in the opener in 2022 against ULM. The guy turned into a first-team All-Big 12 player, could have been the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. He ended up with 4 interceptions that year, huge interceptions too, that were helped to decide games. Lianga Lafau is a guy I'm watching, and you know, the fact that Anthony Hill told us this past week that Lianga Lafau is a guy he's taking, tips from about middle linebacker, because Lianga's kind of played that position his whole life, and Anthony Hill's played everywhere, including middle linebacker there at Denton Guyer. But Lianga Lafau is a guy I think really needs to emerge this year for them to have the kind of depth and growth. David Benda, 6-year guy, Texas lucky to have him back, but they've got to build some depth there. And we're hearing good things about Ty Anthony Smith, a guy David Benda calls Hurricane. Because I think he's going to be a big-time special teams player. Not sure how much he'll get on the field on the defense, but definitely a guy to look out for on the special teams side of it. And then, at nickel, Jordan Johnson-Rubel is starting to get some reps there as Jahdae Barron and Jalen Gilbo, when they switch out to corner. He's a guy who I think is coming on. And then, Warren Roberson at corner. I keep mentioning him because he's that guy that he believes he's ready. And so to see him in practice with that swag, I think that's a good sign as well. Because obviously Gavin Holmes, a senior this year, he'll move on. You got to have that next guy come in. Wardell Mack also getting reps at corner. So I think there's a lot of positive signs here that Texas is growing the roster. Here's my question for you, Eric.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what kind of leadership you have until you hit adversity. They're going to hit adversity, probably in week 2 against Michigan, at Michigan. We know who the unquestioned leader is on offense. If they hit a rut, it's Quinn Ewers. On defense, especially in the back end of the defense, because we know Barron Sorrell's kind of the vocal guy on that defensive line. But who in the back end, the back 7 of that defense, is going to be the calming influence if they hit adversity?
2 names instantly come to mind, right? And I'm glad you specified back 7, right? Because it all depends on how you define the back end, talking about secondary or just, off that defensive line. But if you say back 7, 2 names come to mind: Jahdae Barron, Michael Taaffe. I'm going to work in reverse. I think Taaffe is someone who, whether fair or unfair, you're a walk-on, you get hit with that walk-on label, right? So instantaneously, you don't necessarily think of them as the person who's going to be that presence, right? But Taaffe's earned it. Chip, Taaffe's a vocal guy. I got here this time last year. He was one of the names I heard, one of the guys I heard out there during availability being vocal, right? Like saying, hey, going through drills, you do this, you do that. There's no reason why Michael Taaffe can't be that guy. And let's call a spade, right, Chip? Like you can't be the Rudy and be the leader, right? Like you got to be someone who gets a significant amount of playing time to be that type of leader, right? So Taaffe's going to play enough to where his voice is respected there on the back end. And Jahdae Barron is Jahdae Barron. Everyone knows what he brings as a communicator, as a talented playmaker, as someone who has earned the respect of his teammates. Those are 2 guys who come to mind immediately. So I don't think whether it's the ability to be a vocal leader or lead by example, right? Because there are guys who certainly fit that bill as well. I don't think they're lacking any of that in terms of those two guys. I'll give you another one. I think eventually, right, it's hard to come in and be a first-year guy new to the program and kind of command that respect. But I think Andrew Makuba can be that guy as well, right? Just based on he's someone who I think fits more of that lead by example. Then when you see what I'm giving, what I'm doing, that will earn the respect of maybe some of the guys who have been here longer. I think he fits that bill as well. So, Chip, I do want to ask you a question, though. I'm sure you'll have thoughts on what I just said. Flip it back to the linebackers really quick, because you and I kind of batted this around, following practice. Your thought, because I think the more I sit down and think about it, the more I am really encouraged by the thought of Liunga Lafau's development and growing, because I think it's a win-win for Texas, right? And this is the question for you. If Liunga Lafau's development is one to where, like, man, we got to get this guy on the field. Okay, well, then you can push Anthony Hill back to outside because you know what you have, right? And if his development is one that, Hill's really doing his thing in middle linebacker and that's working out, I think his ability, and I don't want to say this flippantly, but I think his ability to play in coverage is one that you could almost even shift him outside, Chip, right? Like, I think in passing situations, or even those 70% of downs that in today's football, you go 4-2-5. You can go Anthony Hill, Liunga Lafau, whatever combination you want. That seems like a win-win for Texas, no?
Yeah, it is. As long as Liunga Lafau hits that, that he needs that confidence breaking point. He just needs to get in a game and make a play and realize, okay, I am ready. I can trust what I see. I can go. And so very interested to see that and how quickly coaches are willing to put him in. I would expect it'll be against Colorado State. If it's not, that would be a bit of a surprise. Really, I think he's the next. I think he's ready or close to being ready. The other guy, Darian Gillette, who's such a good athlete. Tassilia Kana was a kind of he moved from edge to linebacker. This is his first camp as a true linebacker. His development may be a little bit behind Darian Gillette, but Darian Gillette's a guy who needs to come on because he's a excellent dime linebacker, weak side linebacker because of his athleticism. He's got good size. So his confidence, he needs to come on to help fortify that linebacker room. We know they've been a little bit short. Thank God they got Anthony Hill at the last minute 2 years ago, right before signing day, because it's just a little bit thin. You don't have that sure thing coming up yet. Could be Ty Anthony Smith, and we can't forget about Mo Blackwell, because Mo Blackwell is a veteran. He knows what's going on, and he can certainly play weak side and dime linebacker. He was a big part of the Longhorns' third down defense and defense against running quarterbacks last year. When Anthony Hill would move up to the line, Mo Blackwell would come in and with his speed and help make sure that those quarterbacks weren't getting outside, that nothing was getting outside. Avery Johnson didn't get outside against Texas. They kind of debuted that package against K-State last year, and Avery Johnson went right back to the sideline after a series. So, yeah, I think and as far as Michael Taaffe and Jahdae Barron, I agree with you. And Michael Taaffe is an interesting figure in Longhorn Nation, because I think a lot of Longhorn fans feel like, man, he's really good. He's smart. He knows where to be, but he's just not athletic enough to make the play or to strike fear in the opposing offense. And I think back, and Blake Gideon, who started every game of his Texas career, course, he had Earl Thomas next to him for 2 years. And Earl Thomas was out of this world. Made unbelievable play after play after play. And so, Michael Taft, he's got Derek Williams next to him. Derek Williams is coming. Derek Williams could have a breakout year this year. He certainly made some plays last year as a true freshman. But Andrew Makuba and Michael Taft, it's been interesting because Taft has been running, he ran first team defense all through the spring. Makuba was behind Michael Taft. As you said, Taft had earned it. He's a leader. He knows the assignment for everyone on defense. The guy can line people up. And so that's going to be interesting to watch, Eric. What as the season starts to go, what are the pairings at safety? How many snaps is Michael Taft getting? How many snaps is Andrew Makuba getting? Because we know last year was kind of a hodgepodge of guys who could do one thing but not another. And they were either good in coverage or bad at tackling and helping to stop the run. They need guys who can do both. And I think Derek Williams can do both. And we know Andrew Makuba is really good in coverage. We know Michael Taft knows where to be. Sometimes he just can't bring the guy down, or he grabs on and waits for the cavalry to come. So not the most physical guy. Let's put it that way. And then you bring in Jelani McDonald, who is ultra physical, will knock your lights out, will send you flying across the field. So interesting guys there at safety. That position has to be better. Teams picked on it. Teams went after it with success. And so, and then you look at corner, Gavin Holmes, the senior transfer from Wake Forest, runs 4.3. He's getting a lot of run with the first team defense. It's his job to lose. Javion Cole is right there. Warren Roberson thinks he's right there. We know Malik Muhammad is the favorite to be the boundary corner. Malik Muhammad can play anywhere, but that boundary corner where you got to shut down that side of the field. He can do it, but that's, everyone wants to know, how's that pass defense going to be better? Well, it could be the pass rush, could be Trey Moore and Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrell. Or it could be better play out of the safety position, corner position. So it's going to be fun to watch here over the next part of camp.
Chip, I won't belabor this point. I'll make it quick so we can move on. With Taft, you said something I think is interesting. You talked about, kind of this feeling that he's not necessarily the most athletic. I'm going to say this. In the year that I've seen Michael Taft, is he going to beat Xavier Worthy in a foot race? No. Is he going to be as agile as Silas Bolden? No. However, I don't see a player who isn't athletic enough versus 95% of the competition. I'm not saying he's as athletic as 95% of the players. I'm just saying for what he's asked to do. And Chip, this is a name you'll remember. The old Florida State safety, Dexter Jackson, right? Dexter Jackson did some volunteer work with my high school down in Tampa. And I'll never forget him saying this, talking about safety play, saying, you can be as athletic as you want, right? You can be the fastest guy, the quickest guy. If you're out of position, you're consistently chasing and your back is turned, right? If you're in position, that makes up for whatever foot speed you may lack or whatever agileness. And Michael Taft is that guy to me, right? So I'll just make
and
that.
So
point.
is Blake Gideon.
And I would assume, right. So
very similar.
So that's what I'll say when it comes to Taft. Everything else, completely agree with you, but that's just want to add that point really quick because that's something that stands out to me that I think I have not seen a guy who just looks like, man, okay, barbecue chicken right there, right? We need to point to him and target him. So that's just a quick thought I'll add when it comes to Taft. Chip.
Yeah. Well, and I heard yesterday, the first padded practice, that the offense lit it up. There were, big play touchdown or big pass plays from both Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. It's one day of practice, but I think some of the concerns, because I heard it was Silas Bolden, it was Matthew Golden, it was Jonte Cook. There's some concern, and Ryan Wingo. There's some concern about the chemistry between the quarterbacks and the receivers. I think the chemistry is going to be fine, Eric. I think this offensive line is going to be okay between the quarterbacks and the receivers. What level of concern do you have about that? The quarterbacks and receivers getting on the same page?
Chip, call me prisoner of the moment, but I think they're going to be just fine. Why do I think that? Quinn Ewers is a good quarterback, and I don't think he's going to have any problem hitting guys who are open. And I think Silas Bolden is going to get open. I think Matthew Golden is going to get open. And I think Ryan Wingo, excuse me, and Jonte Cook and Isaiah Bond are going to get open, right? That's it. When I say prisoner of the moment, I saw how shifty Silas Bolden was. I saw how good Matthew Golden looks, and the list goes on. It's this part of camp in which, you're only hitting guys in the same color, right? You're going up against guys wearing the same color uniform as you. There's only so much you can kind of do. And yes, there may be some little, timing issues here or there that will get worked out. We still got another 20-something days to get those things worked out. Or even if you want to lessen it, right? Because eventually you got to install a game plan. Let's call it 2 scrimmages worth, right, of time that they have. So probably another 10 days as we're taping this to get those things worked out. But I know Quinn Ewers knows how to hit guys who are open. Quinn Ewers' completion percentage rate jumped 11 points, right? 58% in 2022, 69 and change in 2023. I know he knows how to hit guys who will be open. I think those guys will be open. So cut and dry there for me, Chip.
Yeah. All right. One other thing before we get to some take it or leave it. And of course, congrats to all the Longhorns who've won medals in the Olympics. It's been a lot of fun to watch. Ryan Krauser, Julian Alfred. It's been a lot of fun. One other thing, Eric, Barron Sorrell, we talked to him yesterday. Barron Sorrell was asked about Trey Moore, and he said, when he was asked how Trey Moore is going to fit in, he said, well, he comes in on the other side. So I thought that was interesting because that other side is Ethan Burke's side. And Ethan Burke was the team's sack leader last year, and is the highest rated run defender returning for the Texas Longhorns. Did a great job in keeping runs from getting outside, setting the edge against the run with that size, 6'6", 260, the length. And his sacks were, he had a sack against Alabama, 2 sacks against K-State, including a strip sack that led to a Texas touchdown. Your thoughts on how that plays out? Because Ethan Burke, to me, is first and second down guy. Trey Moore, third down guy. Do you think it breaks down like that? How do you see it?
Chip, I just wanted to quickly pull up the numbers, right, while we're taping this. So last year, Barron Sorrell played 587 snaps. Ethan Burke played 434 in 13 games. Of course, he missed the one game with the knee injury. Jet Bush, 273. Justice Finkley, 284. Those were your edge defenders. How do I see this breaking down? I have talked about this really since the start of camp. I easily see this being kind of a 3-man triumphant of co-starters, so to speak. I think Barron Sorrell, probably your most well-rounded overall edge defender, right? So I expect his snaps to, again, be kind of where he was last year. But can I see Ethan Burke and Trey Moore both being around that high 300s to 400 range? Absolutely. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like Jet Bush was your pass rush specialist, right? Justice Finkley was more that rotational guy, come in, set the edge, be adequate against the run. That's what it looks like to me. Maybe you cut down, because in my mind, Trey Moore can do everything, right? It's just a matter of him kind of getting there. I feel confidence in this. Is no disrespect to Ethan Burke, a better pass rusher than Burke. And I'm probably biased because I saw Trey Moore for a year, saw his breakout game, right, at the G5 level. But I do believe naturally he's a better pass rusher. If he fills in some of those situational pass rush snaps while also getting some of those snaps you would get as kind of a co-starter, yeah, that's what that looks like to me. And it's a great problem to have. Again, all first world problems. We know Ethan Burke can play, right? And I want to make this clear because I don't want this to get lost in what I said earlier. Trey Moore, Ethan Burke, that's not a situation of out recruiting, right? Ethan Burke's a stud. He can play. You just have a guy in Trey Moore who is so good, you need to find a way to get him on the field as well, right? But that's what that looks like to me. It's pretty simple. It's a great problem to have.
Yeah. Yeah, Ethan Burke is a guy who I think is just starting to figure it out. I mean, again, a guy who just started playing football as a freshman in high school as a way to stay in shape for lacrosse, and made plays, applied the pressure on Quinn Ewers that led to the 2 interceptions by Michael Taff in the 2021 6A state championship game that Westlake won over Quinn Ewers South Lake Carroll. So I think Ethan Burke his best is yet to come. They should have answers. They should have answers for that pass rush that Steve Sarkisian has wanted to improve. They 32 sacks last year. A lot of quarterback pressures, but they didn't get guys on the ground, and so let's see if Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, Trey Moore can turn up the heat on the opposing quarterbacks. All right, Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it?
I am ready, CB.
All right, let's do it. We'll be right back. All right, and if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on with everybody's favorite part of the show. Take it or leave it. You ready, Eric?
I am ready, Chip Brown. Take it or leave it. Number 1 through 1 week of fall camp. The best position battles at the receiver spot. Take it or leave it.
I mean, I think it's such a fun position battle to watch because the talent is so rich that I think I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to say, yes, it is the best position battle because it's been so much fun to watch. These guys are competing so hard to get into the top of that rotation that it's been just scintillating. I mean, I mentioned all the guys who made plays yesterday in camp. Big pass plays, like big play passes down the field. Jonte Cook, Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden, Ryan Wingo. So, yeah, I love watching this. I mean, there are some great position battles going on. We've talked about, the nitty gritty going on. Juan Davis battling Amari Nyblack for reps as the down the field tight end. Jalen Gilbo and Jade Barron doing their thing at nickel and corner. The safety position, we mentioned Michael Taff, Andrew Makuba. But, yeah, that receiver position's been fun to watch, Eric. I'm taking it.
I am leaving it, Chip. Here's why. All those guys are going to play, right, Chip? Prior to the year, prior to camp, I would have agreed with you because I was like, all right, is this the year Sark expands the rotation? When it was a question mark, if 4, 5, 6 guys could possibly play, I would take it. But now that it's kind of established, and especially when Sark hinted, he outright said it, I got 5 guys who can play different spots. So, there's going to be versatility there. They're going to get on the field. I'm honing in on that defensive tackle spot because, as I've written about, as the numbers show, 5 guys played last year. If you're outside of that, you're not really playing. You're getting just rotational snaps that may come at the end of ball games, right? That, to me, is the best position battle. Now, granted, you could say that maybe you think you know the 5 already in the vets, AC, Vern, the 3 transfers, Norton, Savea, Lole. But if I'm Sadira Mitchell, I'm Jeray Bledsoe, I'm Alex January, who I keep hearing my name every once in a while from Steve Sarkisian saying I'm making plays. I want to play, So that's where I'm saying, because if I'm not one of those 5, you're not really playing. So I'm going to leave the Chip.
Yeah. No, that's a good call. It's a good position battle right there. All right. Take it or leave it. Number 2. Your guy, Trey Moore, will have more sacks this season than last year's sack leader, Ethan Burke. Take it or leave it.
I'm going to take it, and I will take it that he is going to lead this team in sacks. I think Trey Moore will have double-digit sacks this year for Texas. As I wrote about in 4 Downs, I think he is going to be a game wrecker. I think he's going to be a force in the SEC. Really encouraged with what I've seen from him, especially because of the depth at edge, right? Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke. It's not like he's got to be a guy who comes out there and plays 500-600 snaps. He doesn't have to be the guy like he was the G5 level. It's going to be part of a group. I'm taking it, Chip.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this because, I've looked at the numbers. Trey Moore played 3 Power 4 schools, Houston, Texas, and Tennessee. Never had a sack against any of them. Loaded up on sacks against the East Carolinas, the FIUs of the world. I'm going to leave this. I think Ethan Burke is on the verge of a breakthrough. He reminds me a lot of Max Crosby of the LA Raiders. He's just nasty. He's tough. He stops the run on the way to the passer with those long arms. I think against the large humans in the SEC, Ethan Burke is a little better physically equipped. If Trey Moore is such a technician, he's that fast and he's got that bend, we know, and he's got multiple pass rush moves, I will gladly say good call to my man Eric Henry, who has probably watched Trey Moore a little more closely than I have. I just was impressed with Ethan Burke, especially a guy who played on a bad knee for 4 games, had arthroscopic surgery midseason, came back. His first game back was the K-State game, 2 sacks, including the strip sack. I see Ethan Burke as having a decision to make at the end of this year that maybe both of these guys do in terms of the NFL. They'll both be draft eligible after this season. I think Trey Moore is actually draft eligible now. But yeah, I'm going to leave this. I'm going to go with my man, Ethan Burke. All right, Eric, take it or leave it. Number 3.
To bring us home, take it or leave it. Number 3, the Longhorns will average more than 35 points this year. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, it was interesting. I asked Steve Sarkisian about, okay, you've averaged 35 points pretty much your first 3 seasons at Texas. Do you pay attention to that? Do you see it going up this year? And he mentioned finishing drives, Eric, and that's and the proficiency of Quinn Ewers as a 3rd-year starting quarterback with these receivers. I'm going to take this. That offensive line, I think they're going to be able to get in when they have 1st and goal from the 1 against Oklahoma, if they have it again, because they've got to run the football better in the red zone. And, obviously we're waiting on the results of the knee injury to CJ Baxter, but Jaydon Blue, Trey Wisner, that offensive line, I'm taking it. How about you?
I am taking it. I am very optimistic, very excited about this Texas offense this year. All the pieces are falling into place. Now, granted, we'll see what happens with CJ Baxter's injury, because that was part of my feeling about this answer, Chip. However, you take a look at the receivers. Go back and look at his time in Alabama, Steve Sarkisian's time in Alabama. Being able to mix and match positionless football, right? That's when Steve Sarkisian had that offense really cooking with the Crimson Tide. The running backs going in doing their things as well. Having the right quarterback. You feel you have all those pieces. Tight end, offensive line. I thought this was the year that, quite frankly, they were pushing 40, right? And I still think that's within reach. Again, we'll have to see what happens at the running back spot, because I think you need all of your pieces to kind of have all of that versatility to do some of the things you want to do. But 35, I think they'll eclipse that this year. I am taking it.
All right. There you have it, kids. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Flagship Podcast. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Make sure you become an annual member at Horns 24/7. That way you get VIP access to all the team sites on the preeminent 24/7 sports network. As a Texas fan, you'll be able to check up on what's going on at Michigan and Georgia. It is an absolute steal of a deal, 30% off annual membership. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Stay safe and keep the faith.